What up, though? Let's get into this. We peeling back the layers of the proverbial onion. Northwestern University Institute for Policy Research. What drives Native American poverty? It's important that you know when we're speaking of Native Americans, there's a difference between Native Americans and American Indians. See, the American Indians were here before any foreigners. Native Americans are a culmination of foreigners. Now, this isn't just coming from me, and some might say, well, where are your sources to back this up? I invite you to go to my channel, start at the beginning, and do your best to watch all of the shows that I've done. And, there are many old texts that point to this being the truth. But the most important source you have would be your family. So start with genealogy. We all have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. Now, why is it important to know that Native Americans are different from American Indians? Well, the American Indian has been reclassified from the very title or designation that they gave themselves or that our ancestors gave themselves. And we've been reclassified as, you know the story, Negro, Negro, Negra, Negress, colored, black, all the way until present day African American, which a lot of people today are getting away from, but these same individuals are settling for black. Like most people when they come here, and they are one of the many shades of brown or copper or burnt copper or French vanilla or lemon meringue or red. A lot of those people are identifying as black. Why? Well, for the same reason that the people who identify as Native American do so. So they can get your stuff. Look, I'm not here to tell you that you're something. Enough people have already told you that you're somebody or something that you may not be. I'm not here to tell you who you are. I'm going to leave that up to you. But I will say it's important for us to distinguish the Native American from the African American. And by African American, the black, the colored, the Negro. properly the American Indian. Hey, I know it may come as a shock to a lot of people. I was shocked when I did my genealogy, or when I started doing my genealogy. I was expecting to locate that ancestor, to locate that ship manifest, which they are out there. The ship manifest are out there. I just knew I was going to locate the ship manifest that pointed me in the direction of the African, or the ancestors that were from the soil portion that many people call Africa, which is Afro-Eurasia, if you want to be specific, because it's all one landmass. Now, I don't want to talk about all the land masses being connected and what some call Pangea and millions of years ago. Look, I can't conceive of a million of anything. I don't know anything about the world. But what I do know is that foreigners have come here for hundreds of years, and they all wanted our stuff. We hear about Native Americans being no longer being here. They were exterminated. We've heard the stories of the smallpox blankets that disseminated the Native American population. We hear of the Native Americans on reservations and such. We hear of their struggles. I mean, we've heard of their struggles. To be completely honest with you, I've never seen a Native American. Look, I've seen in person, or in real life. I didn't see an African until I was past 30 years old. But when we hear about Native Americans, we hear their victim story, which led me to want to know, or peel back this particular layer and learn a little bit more about their victimhood, and if it's justified. Let's shake it. Northwestern University Institute for Policy Research. What drives Native American poverty? Sociologist Beth Redbird's research points to job loss, not education, as a key driver. This is February 2020. Beth Redbird, assistant professor of sociology. This is Beth Redbird in the picture, a self-proclaimed Native American. Now, if Miss Beth Redbird, which, if you notice, it seems that all Native Americans have names similar to this. I mean, to make it look right, to make it sound right, in terms of them being the indigenous people to this soil. Got to make it look right. You got to make it sound right. But if you look closely, it don't necessarily look right. Because if you are native, or better yet, if you're indigenous to a soil portion, if you sprout it from that soil, and if we're talking about America, we're talking about subtropical climates here. If this woman, Beth Redbird, laid out in that subtropical sun, things would happen to her skin that would make it seem as though it's unnatural for her to be in that sun. Across the United States, 1 in 3 Native Americans are living in poverty, and they're very careful to say Native Americans because at some point in the past, the recent past, meaning 20, 30 years or so, don't quote me on that, look it up for yourself. Native Americans were saying that being called Indian was a derogatory term, and rightfully so, because they are not the Indians. They are not the American Indians, of which all the historical figures speak of. The American Indians. Let's move on. Across the United States, 1 in 3 Native Americans are living in poverty, and that is from Institute for Policy Research at Northwestern University. 1 in 3 Native Americans are living in poverty. Journal of Men's Health. The Poison That Ruined the Nation. Native American Men, Alcohol, Identity, and Traditional Healing. I cannot pronounce this name. Ariane Matamonasa Bennett, PhD. Alcoholism and destructive drinking patterns are serious social problems in many Native American reservations. Alcoholism and other serious social problems facing Native American communities need to be understood in the socio-cultural and historical context of colonization and historical grief and trauma. This study suggests that for Native American men, there are culturally specific perspectives on alcohol that have important implications for prevention and treatment of alcohol abuse. For these men, alcohol was highly symbolic of colonization, as well as a protest to it. Alcohol was a means for affirming Indian identity, and sobriety a means for reaffirming traditional tribal identity. Now, I don't have to tell you that they're going to sprinkle Indian in there with Native American. This is, in fact, to make everything look right, read right, and sound right. Keep the lie alive. It's always a little poison in the Kool-Aid. Methamphetamine in Indian country. Now, when you read historical documents, the whole of America, including the islands, the Americas, the American islands, the West Indies, America as American India, home of the American Indian, it is said historically that the whole of America is Indian country. Don't let them fool you. This drug, methamphetamine, has disproportionately devastated Native American tribal communities. There are over 560 independent sovereign tribal governments and communities in the United States. So they would have you believe that methamphetamine is devastating a large portion, or some substantial portion of the 560 independent sovereign tribal governments and communities in the United States. However, they never told us how many they were affecting. I'm going to take a wild guess and say the plains, Oklahomas and North Dakotas and all these places where they put the people who they term Native American. Native Americans now experience the highest meth usage rates of any ethnic group in the nation. And by nation, I guess they mean the United States, the nation of occupiers on foreign land, foreign soil that they're occupying. The reasons drug cartels have targeted Native communities are the complex nature of criminal jurisdiction on Indian reservations, and because tribal governmental police forces have been historically underfunded and understaffed. Nationally, Native Americans have the highest rates of methamphetamine abuse. In May 2006, the White Mountain Apache tribe in Arizona testified in front of the Senate Indian Affairs Committee that 30% of their tribal employees recently tested positive for meth use. Tribal employees are often the community leaders. And because of testing limitations, this number is actually believed to be an underestimate of use. The Yavapai Apache Nation in Arizona estimates that approximately 90% of their open child welfare cases are related to methamphetamine. 70% of meth in the United States is being imported primarily from Mexico. The Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota is approximately the size of Connecticut. The Navajo Nation in Arizona and New Mexico is approximately the size of West Virginia. Many tribes like the Rosebud in South Dakota just average 2 to 3 officers per shift. In Rosebud, they covet on average 400 miles per shift per officer. It's not difficult to imagine how hard it would be for 2 to 3 officers to cover an area the size of a small town or a small state. This reads, the way this reads is that the Native Americans are victims of methamphetamine, right? It doesn't, if I didn't have my own thinking, if I didn't think for myself, I would think that these adults did make the choice to use methamphetamines. Tribal leaders take their governmental responsibility to serve and protect their communities very seriously. Okay, tribal leaders, they take their responsibilities to serve and protect their communities very seriously. Representatives from all walks of tribal government are members of the task force, including chairpersons, chiefs of police, substance abuse counselors, and local educators. White House Indian Country Federal Meth Initiative Task Force. In addition to the Tribal Leader Task Force, the White House runs the sister task force for federal government agencies with responsibilities in Indian country or on reservations. Again, the whole of America is American Indian country, including but not limited to the Department of Justice, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Border Patrol, the Drug Enforcement Agency, Indian Health Services, Health and Human Services, and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Agency. Now, a minute ago, we were just told about the 2 to 3 officers covering a 400-mile area in terms of law enforcement for their community. Well, I just read about 5 or 6 agencies that are also involved. NCAI, National Media and Education Campaign. The NCAI task force is working closely with Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Justice System, and the Office of National Drug Control Policy. The Partnership for a Drug-Free America and Scholastic to create a comprehensive Indian country anti-meth media and education campaign. Included in the campaign will be radio and print ads and educational materials such as elementary school readers. This is November 2006. 2006 is the year of this document. Cherokee Children's Marble Games. For Cherokee children in Oklahoma, the traditional game of Cherokee marbles has been passed down for generations, but in the past 2 years, it has taken on a different meaning. At public elementary and middle school across 14 counties, a demonstration program called Use Your Marbles, Don't Use Methamphetamine sets up the game as a strategy to prevent use of methamphetamines. Y'all remember marbles, right? Yeah, we used to play marbles when I was a shorty. I don't know how many of y'all play marbles or played marbles, or do people play still? But did you see that? Marbles. You ever hear Native Americans talking about marbles? Recently, the lighthouse, do you ever hear Native Americans? Recently, the lighthouse or the light horse police of the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma. Strange how everyone's in Oklahoma. Yeah, I know, the Indian Removal Act. What Indians were removed? Because during that time, my people were in Alabama, Kentucky, Georgia, and they didn't move. Not all of them, anyway. Were people moved? Or were people given an incentive to move? Recently, the Light Horse Police of the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma worked together with the DEA. Okay, the DEA, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drug Control, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives on Operation 700 Ranch Roundup, which has resulted in one of the biggest methamphetamine busts in the region. Satan's Disciples, a violent street gang from Chicago, had set up shop in southern Oklahoma and northeastern Texas. Together, the task force seized more than 15 pounds of meth, confiscated $161,000 in cash, 49 weapons, and over 50 people have been arrested so far. Regular, schmegular stuff, you know. Okay, this is the Missoula Current. Native American communities have highest suicide rates. Help scarce. Now, we're speaking of the people who You know, as Native Americans, the people who have deep traditions, right? The people who there's been a propaganda campaign to be sympathetic and empathetic to them for as long as you know. And it says, help scarce. Cheryl Platzman Weinstock. We're family oriented and we do stuff together. I had healthy pregnancies. We're very protective of our kids, said Morning Star. Her name is Morning Star. Who else's name is Morning Star? Or the Morning Star? Who lives in Hart Butte, Montana, a town of about 600 residents on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. Okay. Non-Hispanic indigenous people in the United States die by suicide at higher rates than any other racial or ethnic group, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. I don't know how trustworthy they are, but we'll continue. Teresa Brookie, an associate professor at Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, is one of a small but growing number of researchers, many of whom are indigenous, who study suicide prevention and intervention strategies that respect indigenous beliefs and customs. Suicide prevention and intervention strategies that respect indigenous beliefs and customs. What could they mean? Respect indigenous beliefs and customs if there's a suicide epidemic? Isn't the goal to prevent that from happening? Those strategies include smudging, the practice of burning medical plants to cleanse and connect people with their creator. Sounds romantic, doesn't it? Romantic / bullshit. Many tribal communities rely on limited mental health resources available through the Indian Health Service. One person at IHS is tasked with addressing suicide across almost 600 tribal nations. Really? So they don't get the resources they need. Pamela End of Horn. This is her name, Pamela End of Horn. And mind you, I'm not going to say anything like it's written in stone or like I actually know, but from my limited understanding, it seems as though these names are for a performance or an act, theater. Pamela End of Horn. Pamela End of Horn? A social worker and national suicide prevention consultant in IHS said the Department of Veterans Affairs has a suicide coordinator in every medical center across the U.S., plus case managers. I guess she's saying that they don't have as many resources as the Veterans Affairs. Part of his therapy included going to a sweat lodge for ritual steam baths as a means of purification and prayer. A sweat lodge or a bathhouse? Question mark. Foundation for Economic Education. Why Native American reservations are the most poverty-stricken lands in America. Why? Guess this is from T.org. T.org. And I guess the background is a Native American reservation. And we see the people that are termed Native Americans right there. Rebecca May Yeagley. The United States became the most prosperous nation in the history of the world. The prosperity that exists due to the institutions created by the founders is not afforded to all American citizens, or properly all United States citizens. America is the soil, and the soil has always been America. And the inhabitants of the Americas and America have always been American Indians. An American Indian isn't derogatory to the American Indians. Burdensome regulations on reservations prevent Native Americans from partaking in the prosperity. Native American reservations in the United States are disproportionately poverty-stricken. Research suggests that these problems stem from federal oversight over Native American businesses, property, and energy development on reservations. So they're saying that the oversight, the restrictions, the grip of the United States government over the Native Americans, or the people you term Native Americans. Tribal sovereignty is more a hollow legal concept than a meaningful policy position. William F. Buckley Jr. once said, "There is an inverse relationship between reliance on the state and self-reliance. Native Americans are no exception. Native Americans are the most regulated demographic in the United States, and not coincidentally, the most impoverished." Of the 50 million acres of land on Native American reservations, only 5% of that land is owned privately by individuals. Over 50 million acres. Of land, or properly of American soil, on Native American reservations. Only 5% of that land is owned privately by individuals. Now, how many acres of land are there in the Americas? And what percentage of that land is owned privately by the American Indians? At 26.2%, the Native American poverty rate is almost double that of the rest of the United States. Nearly all tribal land is managed by the federal government. Everything that happens on Native American lands must wind its way through an arduous bureaucratic process. The tribes have little, if any, control over those processes. Home ownership, natural resource development, and entrepreneurship on Native American lands are substantially hindered by government oversight. Federal ownership of tribal lands complicates home buying and real estate development for Native Americans. In 2012, the Obama administration launched the buyback program for all fractionalized land as part of the Cobell versus Salazar settlement. Essentially, the Bureau of Indian Affairs will buy the interest in fractioned land from individual Native Americans. The 5% that they say own the land, or own some of the 50 million acres. A 2016 article in the Journal of Developmental Entrepreneurship concludes that the three key disincentives to entrepreneurship on reservations are: 1, poorly defined property rights; 2, limited access to financial capital; and 3, the arduous business licensing process. Manny Jules, a former chief of a Canadian tribe, some old Canadian tribe: "We've been legislated out of the economy," the former chief says. "When you don't have individual property rights, you can't build, you can't be bonded, you can't pass on wealth." Sound familiar? Releasing tribal lands, it sounds familiar, but we all over the place, right? It seems as though it sounds very familiar, but a lot of it with us, the American Indians, is that it's a part of the choices that we make. It's a part of the slumber. Wake up, wake up. Releasing tribal lands from federal trust and transferring them into the hands of tribes and individual Native Americans will cut the red tape that blocks economic development. The history of Native American reservations makes clear that the root of the problem is federal involvement in the Indian country, or in the Indian economy. What Indian economy? I've never frequented an Native American, and they're using these two, Native American and Indian, interchangeably. It's all a device to confuse, propaganda to confuse you, which it has. The Indian or the Native American economy, where is it? When have you, now if you're on a soil portion, you're in the land of, okay, let's just say you're in the land of the Native American. What part of the current culture of America, and when I say America, let's just speak of what we term as North America, the part that the United States is currently occupying, on that portion, what part of the culture do you partake in that's Native American? The federal government has legislated Native Americans into perpetual poverty. The federal government has legislated Native Americans into perpetual poverty. This is from IJEC. Native American communities continue to face barriers to opportunity that stifle economic mobility. Native American communities face significant and unique barriers to accessing economic opportunities. Native American communities in the United States can see how they use it properly in some instances, but in other instances, they'll say something that's not related to Native Americans or the United States Corporation. It'll confuse you. But this is where you have to know your own story. Because if you know your own story, you'll know how you fit in to his story. And your story, I'd be willing to bet that it's much more interesting than his story. Native American communities in the United States continues to face pervasive structural barriers that threaten their economic security and opportunities. This report uses American Indian and Alaskan Natives interchangeably with Native American and Native communities or people. This is done while recognizing evolving discussions concerning the limitations of existing definitions, counts, and data sources. In 2020, the Allen AIAN identifying population reached 9.7 million, accounting for 2.9% of all people living in the United States, compared with 1.7%, 5.2 million in 2010. From 2010 to 2020, the American Indian and Alaska Native identifying population increased by 160%. This report uses American Indian. See, these people, the people who are the authors of the report, they have to cover their tracks. At some point, they have to cover their tracks. I mean, their reputation's on the line. This report uses American Indian and Alaska Natives interchangeably with Native Americans and Native communities or people. Now, why would they need to tell you that? If the Native American is the American Indian and the American Indian of antiquity, the American Indian of indigenous sprouting from the American soil fame, why would they need to say that they're using Native American interchangeably? Perhaps because there is no such thing as a nation of people called Native Americans. Maybe. This is from Smithsonian. Why the U.S. government is paying $500 million in settlements to 17 tribal governments. That adds to 95 cases the U.S. has settled with Native groups since 2012. Jason Daly, September 2016. This is from the Smithsonian. The group who has, let me see how I can put this. The organization We'll get to the Smithsonian on another show. The show is forthcoming. Let's move on. We will speak to the Smithsonian on a future show. Great Falls Tribune. Tribes to receive $31 billion in relief funds from American Rescue Plan. Mark Trahant, Indian Country Today. Oh, and just by the way, the American Indian was reclassified as Negro, Negro, Negra, Negress, colored, African American, the blacks, in order to separate us from the soil, in order to make it right. Because if you go by the agreements made early on, it would be unlawful to treat the American Indian, the original inhabitants of this soil, in a certain manner. It would be unlawful. So how about this? We're going to change the identity of these people, and we're going to make other people think that they are these people. I mean, look at today. Foreigners come here every single day. And when they come to land in this country, They're no longer their home country. They're their home country dash American, right? Right? You know it's right. You know it. Mark Trahan, Indian Country Today. This is 2021. Remember, remember, we were just speaking of the dilapidated conditions, the suicide, the drug infested condition of the Native American, the tight grip that the federal government has on the Native American, the reason that they don't have any opportunity. Tribes to receive 31 billion in relief funds from American Rescue Plan. From the Smithsonian, why the U.S. government is, this is 2012, why the U.S. government is paying $500 million in settlements to 17 tribal governments. 2016, I'm sorry. Great Falls Tribune, tribes to receive 31 billion in relief funds from American Rescue Plan. 2021, the American Rescue Plan was enacted by Congress Wednesday and will be sent to President Joe Biden to sign into law. The U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs pegged the total spending for tribes at $31 billion. The 628-page C-19 relief legislation includes 1,400 in direct payments to individuals making up to $75,000 annually, giving $350 billion in aid to state and local governments, $20 billion to tribal nations, and budgets $14 billion for vax distribution. The law will extend jobless benefits through September. The plan pumps money directly into the economy through all sorts of mechanisms, including $20 billion that will go directly to tribal nations and another $6 billion for Indian health programs or Native American health programs. How much money do natives get when they turn 18? By Donald Gianassi, 2022. In the United States, because Native Americans are considered, this is from CGAA.org. CGAA.org. In the United States, because Native Americans are considered, let's take a sidebar here. A synonym of the word considered from thesaurus.com is treated. Considered. A synonym is treated. And it's, one more time. In the United States, because Native Americans are considered indigenous people or are treated as indigenous people. And another thing was, it was interesting that we as American Indians, or the people who you term Black or African American, we've always used the word treated. Like if you treated someone, you did them dirty. I'm not talking about like you treating someone to dinner. I'm talking about if you treated someone, if somebody got treated, that mean they got did dirty. Okay. Just a bit of the connection to let you know that the American Indian culture ain't went nowhere. In the United States, because Native Americans are treated as indigenous people, they are often eligible for certain benefits and privileges that are not available to other citizens. Now, you blacks, you African Americans, so-called properly American Indians, what if you realized who you were then guess what? You would be eligible. You would be eligible for certain benefits, right? Right? No longer would people who are being treated like they're you, no longer would they get benefits. You would then get the benefits. But guess what your benefits would be? Your benefits would be that, well, I won't tell you what your benefits would be. I'll tell you that when you got your benefits, the attitude that you would probably have would be, you want to clean up your house now. You want everybody to go home. You need to clean up. You might invite them back at some point, but for now, you need to clean up. Let's shake it. In the United States, because Native Americans are treated as indigenous people, they are often eligible for certain benefits and privileges that are not available to other citizens, namely you. One of these benefits is a financial payout when they turn 18. According to the Indian Health Service, each tribal member 18 or older gets a share of the tribe's mineral lease, timber, or grazing profits. This money is typically distributed per capita, meaning each individual receives an equal amount regardless of family size or need. The amount of money each Native American receives when they turn 18 can vary greatly depending on the wealth of the tribe and the profit sharing arrangement that is in place. For example, the Seminole tribe of Florida reportedly doles out around $125,000 to each member when they turn 18. For example, the Seminole tribe in Florida reportedly doles out around $125,000 to each member when they turn 18. Look, the federal government grip ain't looking too bad. While the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians in California gives out annual per capita payments of around $10,000 per member. While the exact amount of money a Native American will receive when they turn 18 can vary, it is clear that this benefit can provide a much needed financial boost to young adults who are just starting out in life. Would you look at that? CGAA.org. See? If you want to know about yesterday, look at today. The friendly people from all over the world, they come here and they just want to work, right? They just want to work. We just want to work. We want work. They coming to take your stuff. Somebody promised them your stuff. Regardless of who promised them your stuff, you giving them your stuff. But it's all manner of there's all manner of confusion. There's all manner of distractions to keep you not even thinking about anything like this. You trying to get money. You want money. You want the bag. But see, you're short-sighted. You want the bag now. You don't want the soil and all the things that the bag is actually made from. PBS News. 15 Native American tribes to receive $580 million in federal money for water rights settlement. 2023. Washington, 15 Native American tribes will get a total of $580 million in federal money this year for water rights settlements, the Biden administration announced on Thursday. The money will help carry out the agreements that define the tribe's rights to water from rivers and other sources and pay for pipelines, pumping stations, and canals that deliver it to reservations. Water rights are crucial to ensuring the health, safety, and empowerment of tribal communities, U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland said in a statement Thursday that acknowledged the decades many tribes have waited for the funding. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 1908 that tribes have rights to as much water as they need to establish a permanent homeland. And those rights stretch back at least as long as any given reservation has existed. So before the Native Americans were on reservations, that right or that agreement was in place. Who was that agreement for? I guess it would be for the original people of this soil, which were and are the American Indian. But see, the American Indians don't know that they're American Indians. How beneficial. So give it to these people and then we could wash it like this. As a result, tribal water rights often are senior to others in the West, where competition over the dwindling resource is often fierce. Dwindling resource. Water as a dwindling resource. Why is it a dwindling resource? Well, how about if maritime admiralty law, how about if people didn't claim to own water? Then we could start that conversation. Of the funding announced Thursday, $460 million comes from the $2.5 billion set aside for Native American water rights settlements in the Biden administration's infrastructure bill, a federal fund created by Congress in 2009 to pay for water rights settlements will contribute the other $120 million. We got a lot of people. Look, this ain't about no it obviously is about politics because we're speaking of the people who are designating these funds, and these people seem to be designating funds only to foreigners, never to the indigenous people, never to the American Indian. And blacks and African Americans wonder why. You protest. And ain't nobody doing it to you but you. Interior said Thursday's funding was part of the $1.9 billion trust created when Haaland signed the tribe's compact. About $39 million is headed to the Navajo Nation for a separate settlement that will fund drinking water infrastructure in San Juan County, a part of the 27,000 square mile, 71,000 square kilometer reservation that is in Utah. Elsewhere, the Blackfeet Nation in Montana will receive $45 million for a settlement that was signed into law by President Barack Obama in 2016 and called for improvements to irrigation system and the development of a community water system. The Crow Nation, San Carlos Apache Nation, Southern Ute Indian Nation, Akchin Indian Community, and pueblos of San Ildefonso Nambre, Nambe, Pojoke, and Tsuke are among other tribes sharing in the money announced Thursday. This is from the White House. March 9th, 2023. President Biden's budget delivers for tribal nations and tribal communities, but not for you. Not for you. You're the only one. Imagine that. Imagine that. And you know what? That's the beauty of knowing who you are. Think about it. You're the only one here that's not a foreigner. Regardless of these people's patriotism, that means nothing. That was learned. You're the only one here who's not a foreigner. And you're the only one here who doesn't benefit. President Biden's budget delivers for tribal nations and tribal communities, and everyone who seems to make the decisions for you is a foreigner. You support foreigners. President Biden is continuing to ensure the federal government honors its commitment to tribal nations and native communities under his leadership. I mean, the guy did say if you don't vote for him, you're not black. He was right. He was right. If you don't vote for him, you're not black. If you do vote for him, you're a black. Right? He was right. If you don't vote for him, you're not a black. If you do, you're a black. Under his leadership, the administration has deployed record investments to tribal nations. Whoa, under his leadership. Rewind this and go back to the beginning and see the dire conditions we were talking about in terms of the native communities. Now listen to this. Under his leadership, the administration has deployed record investments to tribal nations and native communities, including through the American Rescue Plan, the largest direct federal investment in Indian country in history, and the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest single investment in infrastructure for Indian country ever. Ever. The president's budget, informed by direct consultation with tribal leaders, continues to demonstrate the president's commitment through historic investments in the Indian Health Service, tribal public safety, affordable housing, education, and more. Oh, man, this is sad. This is sad. This is sad. This is sad. This was written. This was all written. And you know where it was written? It was written in the annals of the War Department. Can you believe that? We'll talk about that more. It is forthcoming. Building on the advance appropriation, the budget requests an additional $3 billion in 2024 for a total of $8.1 billion in discretionary resources. In addition, the budget reclassifies contract support costs and leases as mandatory for a total of $9.4 billion in discretionary and mandatory resources for IHS in 2024. The budget proposes all IHS resources as mandatory beginning in 2025. Doing everything they can to cripple you as much as possible before you get out of office. Building on feedback from extensive tribal consultations, the budget provides $4.7 billion for DOI's tribal programs, more than $690 million above the 2023 enacted level, including investments that would support public safety and justice, social services, and educational needs to uphold federal trust responsibilities and advance equity. for Native communities. Mind you, we haven't heard anything about American Indians. Now watch while I'm saying this, in the next paragraph is the American Indians. No, we haven't heard anything about the American Indians. And in antiquity and throughout all historical documents and data, this is the land of your ancestors, our ancestors, the American Indians. But that's not who we're speaking of here. We're speaking of the people who are similar to the people who come here every day, who get food, clothing, and shelter, and iPhones, and debit cards, and free rent for a couple years, and, all your stuff. Native Americans are 7 times more likely to live in overcrowded conditions and 5 times more likely to have inadequate plumbing, kitchen, or heating systems than other U.S. households. The budget provides over $1 billion to fund tribal efforts to expand affordable housing, improve housing conditions and infrastructure, and increase economic opportunities for low-income families. It seems as though we know who the Native Americans' daddy is. The budget also reflects a reduction in mortgage insurance fees for the Indian Housing Loan Guarantee Program. Indian Housing Loan Guarantee Program, which will save Native American borrowers over $500 on average in their first year and expand access to home ownership. This is in addition to the 50 million acres and all that, For the Department of Justice, the budget provides $4.9 billion in discretionary resources for state and local grants and $30 billion in mandatory resources to support state, local, and tribal efforts to protect U.S. communities and promote public safety. The budget invests $83 million to electrify tribal homes and transition tribal colleges and universities to renewable energy. Through the Army Corps of Engineers, the budget provides $35 million to help disadvantaged and tribal communities address their water resources challenges, though through technical and planning assistance, $13 million for the Tribal Partnership Program and $58 million to support tribal access to legally recognized historic fishing. Look, fishing areas. Look. You hear a bunch of things about reparations, and you hear, the American descendants of slavery and the, what do you call it? The FBA, Foundational Black Americans, American descendants of slavery. I wonder if the American descendants of slavery know that they're not Slavic. I wonder if the FBA, the Foundational Black Americans, I wonder if they know if they're truly a black or not. I think they're a black. I think they're a black. Because that would explain why they ain't got they ain't getting shh. You understand? See, all that stuff is confusion. All that stuff is getting in the way of you realizing what's going on or what's happening and what's been happening for a long time. Foreigners are taking your stuff. Foreigners are giving other foreigners your stuff, okay? If this particular document right here from the White House read like this, and you were the one on the benefiting end, it wouldn't be no more protesting. It wouldn't be no more problems, no more issues, or nothing like that. But first, you would have to know who you are. Huh. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. But you did. So you are black. You black. 15 million to assist enforcement of tribal special domestic violence jurisdiction and 3 million to support tribal special assistant U.S. attorneys. So was all the stuff in the first document a lie about everything that they're not getting and how the federal government has got a squeeze on them, preventing them from access to opportunities and this and that? Was all that a lie by the lady? What was her name? Something Redbird. Was Redbird lying to us? $2 billion for tribal broadband grants. Remember, they, giving them paper when they turn 18. How many of y'all get some paper when y'all turn 18? Not on your birthday from your family, but how many of y'all get some paper on your birthday? 6 figures or 5 figures or something like that. Just because you the people of this soil. It was in the agreement. It was in the agreement way back in the 1600s and shit, like 1500s and whatnot. Even though I know most of our families wasn't in on this agreement, but it covered us. It's just that your ancestors had no idea that propaganda would be so effective that it would cause that someone else would be able to call you something that you're not. And you would swallow it. The whole thing. The budget provides $2.8 billion in mandatory funding to the Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund, with $2.5 billion to cover the cost of enacted and future water rights settlements, and $340 million for operations and maintenance costs associated with enacted water settlements. That's why it's so funny to me when people say, I ain't African American, I'm a black American. What's the difference? The budget provides $32 million to expand the Rural Partners Network, an all of government program led by USDA that partners with rural and tribal communities to access resources and funding. USDA getting involved. Seems that all the organizations getting involved to give foreigners stuff. Foreigners giving foreigners stuff. Through the American Rescue Plan, the administration invested $32 billion in tribal nations and native communities, the largest single financial assistance investment to tribal governments in history. If think about this, if the federal government is doing all these things for the Native Americans, which, are Chinos and Siberians and Mongolians and Filipinos and Spaniards. The real indigenous people of that place that we call, that is so termed Mexico. Those people look like you. They could be your cousin. They could be your sister or brother. You don't see those people. As a matter of fact, I saw a YouTube video with some of those people, and they had looked at other YouTube videos of African people doing dances, and they were mimicking those dances because somebody told them they were Afro-Mexicans. Can you believe it? Sheesh. Yikes. Yikes. So think about this. Think about this. when you hear Native Americans, go look at some videos on Native Americans. They always speak about colonization. They speak about the white man, and that's always hilarious to me because they're the same complexion. They have the same fur on their head, and they had these same two braids, okay? But they always speak of the white man, right? The pale face, the white man, like he was so horrible. But yet he's giving them so much. Let's shake it. He ain't giving you nothing. Not that we want nothing. Well, that's evident. Only thing I want is for them to go home. And for them to pack up all they people. President's bipartisan infrastructure laws rebuilding tribal roads, bridges, and rails, expanding. This is the white man. This is the colonizer who doing all this for these people. And they get on these videos and they say all manner of things about that man. That man, they stepdaddy. President's bipartisan infrastructure law is rebuilding tribal roads, bridges, and rails, expanding access to clean drinking water for Native communities, helping ensure every Native American has access to high-speed internet, tackling the climate crisis, whatever that is. You know, the climate crisis. I just saw a couple planes in the sky a few days ago spraying some stuff, making zigzags all across the blue sky. The sun was shining. And from the time I got in my car, all the way until I reached my destination 13 miles away, I still saw the planes spraying stuff in zigzags all over the sky. And after a while, later on in the day, the sky didn't seem so blue anymore. It was like a dull gray. And I thought to myself, what type of creature would be doing that? It ain't about who told the pilot to do it. I'm talking about the pilot. President's bipartisan infrastructure laws rebuilding tribal roads, bridges, and rails, expanding access to clean drinking water for Native communities, helping ensure every Native American has access to high-speed internet, tackling the climate crisis, advancing environmental justice, and investing in tribal communities that have too often been left behind. It does so by investing more than $13 billion directly in tribal communities across the country. The bipartisan infrastructure law also makes tribal communities eligible for billions more in much-needed investments. Yes, they are so overlooked. They stepdaddy care about them, man. Yeah, they stepdaddy care about them. They stepdaddy, he stepped up, man. He a true stepfather, man. They don't make him like that no more, man. U.S. Department of the Interior, Indian Affairs. Biden-Harris administration support for Indian country continues through increased investments for immediate release 2024. Washington, the Biden-Harris administration today released the president's budget for fiscal year 2025. The fiscal year 2025 president's budget request for Indian affairs programs and $4.6 billion. This includes $2.9 billion for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, $1.5 billion for the Bureau of Indian Education, and 111.3 million for the Bureau of Trust Funds Administration. Trust Funds Administration sounds like something that you are supposed to have, being that you are the American Indian, the original inhabitant of these lands or the soil we call the Americas. But it's all going to foreigners. And don't get me wrong, it's not about the paper. It's not about the fiat currency. That means nothing. How do you become self-sufficient? Well, it takes soil. Things grow from the soil. The creeks, sweet water creeks. Remember, I was just telling you about the planes that were spraying stuff in zigzag formations for miles and miles and miles all over? Eventually, that stuff goes down to the soil. What type of creature? U.S. Department of the Interior, Indian Country Budget. A review of the President's fiscal year 2024 budget request for Indian Country. Statement of Brian Newland, Assistant Secretary, Indian Affairs, Department of the Interior, before the Subcommittee on Interior Environment and Related Agencies, Senate Committee on Appropriations on the 2024 President's budget request for Indian Affairs programs, May 10th, 2023. 2023, the birth anniversary of Dada. And think about it, when it goes through the Senate Committee on Appropriations and things like that, all these people have great empathy for the poor Native American, you know, the one who commits suicide the most, the one who methamphetamines, got better balls, you know. They have real empathy for them, you know. Okay, no. The President's 2024 budget for Indian Affairs is $4.7 billion. This includes funding for all of Indian Affairs, which includes the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Indian Education, the Bureau of Trust Funds Administration, and the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, as well as proposed mandatory reclassifications for contract support cost and 105I tribal leases. As the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, I oversee the program offices within the BIA, the BIE, the BTFA, and additional programming functions within immediate ASIA office, which is all BS. Here we go. Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Tribal Services, Public Law 93-638, the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act of 1975. Revised October 20th, 2004. It says clean version. Okay. Public Law 93-638, 93rd Congress, S 1017, January 4th, 1975, as amended, an act, theater, to provide maximum Indian participation in the government and education of the Indian people, to provide for the full participation of Indian tribes in programs and services conducted by the federal government for Indians, and to encourage the development of human resources of the Indian people, to establish a program of assistance to upgrade Indian education, to support the right of Indian citizens to control their own educational activities, and for other purposes. Now, let me just tell you something. Did you hear Native American in there once? Now, if we're talking about Public Law 93-638, if we're talking about something like this, then if you're these people, you would want to stick to this particular designation. Indian, American Indian. You would want to stick to this designation because it holds the key to you getting everything that's due to you. It holds the key to you being in control of your life, of your soil, of the soil portion that you need and that needs you. You wouldn't change. You wouldn't change your designation, would you? Why would you change your designation if you're written into this act, if you're written into this agreement? If you're written into this understanding, why would you change who you are? That's just the thing. You never changed who you were. Someone else did it. The foreigner changed who you were. Why? So that this wouldn't apply to you anymore. Again, listen, let's keep going. Section 2. The Congress, after careful review, we just went through all these other documents. We just went through the President Biden allotting certain things to Native Americans. We just went through the articles where they were referring to these people as Native Americans. The people refer to themselves as Native Americans. Who are we talking about here in this particular Public Law 93-638? Who are we speaking of? This says Indian people. The Native Americans have already made it clear that them being called Indian is derogatory. Why would it be derogatory when you're written into law? Because they're not written into law. You're written into law. You've allowed someone to give you a new identity and to steal yours. And people steal yours every day. Again, people come from all around, or not around, I don't know. They come from all different corners, all different quadrants of this place we call Earth. This plane we call Earth. And when they get here, guess what they become? They become you. They become Americans. Why do they want to be Americans so bad? You got people from all over, from every quadrant of this whole place, who will talk about you, say this and say that about you, but everyone wants to be you. Why? How do we know that? Because when they come here, they become American. On paper. And when confronted by authorities or law, they are Americans. But they will protest in the streets on behalf of the country that they fled from. And they expect you to respect that, and they respect you to be as passionate about that. They will have parades. They will fly the flags of the places that they fled from because they love those places so much. But yet, when they get here, they won't go back. The Congress, after careful review of the federal government's historical, remember, this is 1975, Section 2. The Congress, after careful review of the federal government's historical and special legal relationship with and resulting responsibilities to American Indian people finds that the prolonged federal domination of Indian service programs has served to retard rather than enhance the progress of Indian people. Who are those Indian people? Who are those American Indian people? Because what's retarding the progress of the Native American if we just saw that they are giving record breaking resources even in 2024? Compliments of your current administration as well as 2025. The progress of hold on. The Congress, after careful review of the federal government's historical and special legal relationship with and resulting responsibilities to American Indian people, finds that the prolonged federal domination of Indian service programs have served to retard rather than enhance the progress of Indian people and their communities by depriving Indians of full opportunity to develop leadership skills crucial to the realization of self-government, and has denied the Indian people an effective voice in the planning and implementation of programs for the benefit of Indians which are responsive to the true needs of Indian communities. And the Indian people will never surrender their desire to control their relationships, both among themselves and with non-Indian governments, organizations, and persons. The Congress further finds that true self-determination in any society of people is dependent upon an educational process which will ensure the development of qualified people to fulfill meaningful leadership roles. This is from the National Archives. Dawes Records. 5 civilized tribes: Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole tribes in Oklahoma. There is a land allotment file for each approved enrollment number, but they are not available on microfilm. Enrollment cards are arranged into 3 tiers: Tribe, Cherokee, Choctaw, Mississippi Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole. There is a small section of Delaware adopted by the Cherokee at the end of the Cherokee section. Within each tribe, cards are arranged by the following categories: citizens by blood, citizens by marriage, newborn citizens by blood, minor citizens by blood, freedmen, newborn freedmen, and minor freedmen. Within each of these enrollment categories, there are 3 kinds of cards: straight cards for persons whose applications were approved, D cards for persons whose applications were doubtful, and R cards for persons whose applications were rejected. Persons listed on the D cards were subsequently transferred to the approved cards or the R cards, depending on the commission's decision. I just want everyone to know who is listening and will listen and who has listened to this, that all of these words on this paper, all of these words on paper, all of this law, all of this stuff is disgusting to me. This is the opposite of natural. This is the illusion. This is the opposite of natural. This is the opposite of nature. This is the mandate of creatures, of creations, of creatures. The Muskogee Area Office was responsible for administering the Bureau of Indian Affairs business with the 5 civilized tribes, although not established until 1948. The Muskogee Area Office was responsible for administering the Bureau of Indian Affairs business with the 5 civilized tribes, Although not established until 1948, the records of the Muskogee Area Office contain documents created by its predecessor offices, including tribal administrative offices dating from 1835, the Union Agency, and the Five Civilized Tribes agencies. Five civilized tribes. Again, foreigners writing policy for other foreigners and for us. The National Archives at Fort Worth also contains records of several schools for Native Americans that may be of interest to genealogists. This includes Muskogee area office schools, including the Makasuki Academy, Seminole, the Jones and Wheelock Academies, Choctaw, the Uchee Boarding School, Creek, Carter Seminary, Chickasaw, and the Eufaula and Sequoia Schools, Cherokee. The National Archives at Fort Worth also holds records from the Chilocco Indian School. And keep in mind that if you have a bunch of foreigners coming here from a bunch of Anglo-Saxon foreigners coming here, or coming from one of the countries in Europe or something like that, foreigners, if you have them coming here and you have them coming here in the 1800s and such, if you go to Alabama, you go to rural Alabama and you speak to a brother or sister, an American Indian, you would barely understand what they say. So for a foreigner to come here who speaks German or Italian or another language and understand what these people say or what they call themselves or what our ancestors liked or disliked or understood our ancestors is a lie. I mean, most Anglo-Saxons don't understand you today. Unless you what they call speaking proper, or what my father used to call speaking proper. And he didn't mean it in a good way. He meant it in a kind of a, like, you selling out type of way, oh, you proper. That's the way you have to speak to Anglo-Saxons. Proper. But when you speak American and then you sprinkle in a little proper, they really still don't understand you. If you start talking and don't catch yourself and say, wait a minute. Let me realize who my audience is. An act of Congress approved March 3rd, 1893, established a commission to negotiate. Mind you, 1893. We're talking about 1893, which is the time that the wave of European immigrants, European indentured servants, European slaves came here in waves from the mid 1800s to the late 1800s, early 1900s. This is the time that they came. This is the time. I'm telling you, looking at the years helps out a lot. Connects a lot of things. Uncovers, lifts the veil, or raises the skirt on a lot of stuff. An act of Congress approved May 3rd, 1893, established a commission to negotiate agreements with the Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, Seminole, and Cherokee Indian tribes. The commission became known as the Dawes Commission, after its chairman, Senator Henry Dawes of Massachusetts. The commission's mission was to divide tribal land into plots, which were then divided among the members of the tribe. As part of this process, the commission either accepted or rejected applicants for tribal membership based on whether the tribal government had previously recognized the applicant as a member of the tribe and other legal requirements. So think about this. If they're dividing soil into plots and certain people are in control of deciding who gets these plots and who's a part of these particular tribes, what if your family somewhere, they ain't thinking about this shit? Ain't nobody tell them. Know how they learned? You know how they learned about it? Yeah, me neither. We still don't know about it. The commission became known as the Dawes Commission after its chairman, Senator Henry Dawes of Massachusetts. The commission's mission was to divide tribal land into plots, which were then divided, because to this day, you don't know why stuff divided into plots. I don't understand why you have to pay another human being to live on the soil, on planet Earth, on the plane Earth. Ants don't pay other ants to live on Earth, right? We so much smarter than the animals, but we the only ones who pay someone else in our species to live in the place that we arrived at when we came out of our mother's womb. As part of the process, the commission either accepted or rejected applicants for tribal memberships based on whether the tribal government had previously recognized the applicant as a member of the tribe and other legal requirements. Applicants were categorized as citizens by blood, citizens by marriage, minor citizens by blood, newborn citizens by blood, freedmen, African Americans formerly enslaved by tribal members. In 1893, it said freedmen. Right. Listen, in March 3rd, 1893, it says right here, freedmen. In parentheses, it says African Americans formerly enslaved by tribal members. In 1893, they weren't calling groups of people African Americans. They weren't designating or entering into any laws or acts any people called African Americans. Newborn freedmen and minor freedmen. Okay. This is just a map of Oklahoma, Indian Territory, unorganized 1855 to 1865. It says the rainbow colors, the red, the orange, the yellow, the green, and all that is the 5 civilized tribes: the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, Creek, Cherokee. It says unassigned lands right on the handle of it is unassigned lands, and it says public land strip, no man's land, and then it said Plains Indians lands in the gray. And just think, you got millions of people in the Americas on this soil. You got millions of people in what you call North America, properly America, earlier called India, which is why we have the West Indies. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Because of American Indians, right? and it's the only India, because as we all know, the place that most people term India today is Hindustan. How many of your ancestors went to the place that we see on the screen? How many of your ancestors went there? Not many. None of your people going to Oklahoma. Your people stayed in all of the places that they in today, and that they may have just recently left. Okay, so again, we got the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, Chickasaw. Then they say the Plains Indians. You know what I mean? So now, here we go. And look. I wrote in the name and the tribe. I wrote that in, but look, this is readily available information, just like I say for all the information. Sometimes it's very old text, very old books, and a lot of times too, it's also readily available, easy access information, because to be honest, shit is not really hidden. Nothing's hidden, actually. I mean, it got it's sometimes the scramble up the words to confuse you, but I mean, for the most part, it's right there for you. This right here. Now, Seminoles are usually associated with Florida, right? If this man, the Seminole chief, Greg Chilcote, the Seminole chief, understand that now. This is the Seminole chief, Greg Chilcote. If this man went and laid on the beach in Florida, his skin would start to bubble. And let me ask you a question. Can you be from a place? Can you be natural to a place? Is it natural for your skin to bubble if you're in the sun in the place that you're supposed to be? Your people are from this place. You're the chief of your people. You're supposedly indigenous to this soil. But yet, the sun boils your skin and causes you all kinds of problems. Look, let's stop playing these games. You know who the indigenous people of Florida are. You see all them brothers with the wicks, with the locks, with the wicks, with the freeform locks. You see all them brothers down there. You see, and not just them, I'm just saying for an example, that's where you see that at, and you see them brothers down there, you see the sisters down there. You know the people who from Florida. Stop playing. Okay, we have the Cherokee chief. His name is, what is it? I think it's Bill Baker. This is the Cherokee chief. This is the Cherokee chief of tropical, subtropical America, Georgia, Alabama. You know? All these places. What they call the Southeast. This subtropical climate. And at one time, before the mass cutting down of trees, there was much more moisture in the air, which means that underneath the canopy, It held heat and moisture a lot longer. So the weather wasn't at the weather from summer to winter wasn't as extreme as it is today because there were more trees which retained more moisture. And what is moisture? Oxygen, liquid oxygen. What does that mean for your hair? Your hair was always moist. Cherokee, I think that's a Bill Baker. Bill Baker, Cherokee Chief. Now, come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. I mean, if y'all know anything about y'all read any history and saw any of the earlier explorers' descriptions of the American Indians, if you saw the records and the paintings of other places around the world, statues that people made of the American Indians, and I mean, it wasn't a big deal in those times. People knew who people were. If you were doing well, people wanted to acknowledge it. It's only a big deal today. It only became a big deal when the masses needed to be controlled for centuries to come. And it's really a big deal now because I'm an adult. And it's hard to ignore. Okay, here we go. Muskogee Chief James Floyd Creek. Muskogee Chief Creek. James Floyd. Right there. People who sit outside for too long, they skin gonna bubble. This is the Choctaw Chief. And if you notice, the ones who got on some type of patterns on their clothes, they all dress alike. When have you ever known a nigga to all dress alike? Come on, man. Choctaw Chief Gary Baton. Yeah. He's a subtropical kind of guy. Good old Gare. The tropical kind of guy. Okay. Now we getting somewhere. Chickasaw Governor Bill Anatubi. And behind him you see the Cherokee. Good old Bill, the Cherokee Chief. And then right here you see the Chickasaw Governor Bill Anatubi. Stop playing. Y'all know what this is. Y'all know what this is, man. Figureheads. The people who receive a check. Do they distribute that check? You tell me. Matter of fact, ask a Native American if they chiefs distributing them checks. I don't know how people this isn't even serious to me. This definitely not a debate. This definitely not a debate. This is very simple. Very simple. Foreigners giving foreigners our stuff. do the right thing.